July 28th, 2021, 7 p.m. Roll call.
Mr. Hrabowski,
Still here.
Ms. Turner,
Present.
Mr. Burris,
Here.
Mr. Eisner,
Here.
Ms. Rich,
Here.
Mr. Davis, and Ms. Simon are in the audience.
Okay, we go to quasi-judicial announcement and the swearing in of speakers.
This is a quasi-judicial proceeding where the Board of Adjustment acts in a quasi-judicial rather than a legislative capacity. At a quasi-judicial hearing, it is not the board's function to make law, but rather to apply law that has already been established. In a quasi-judicial hearing, the board is required by law to make findings of fact based upon the evidence presented at the hearing, and apply those findings of fact to previously established criteria contained in the Code of Ordinances in order to make a legal decision regarding the application before it. The board may only consider evidence at this hearing that the law considers competent, substantial, and relevant to the issues. If the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has met the criteria established in the Code of Ordinance, then the board is required by law to find in favor of the applicant. By the same token, if the competent, substantial, and relevant evidence at the hearing demonstrates that the applicant has failed to meet the criteria established in the Code of Ordinance, then the board is required by law to find against the applicant. Are there any members of the board wishing to disclose any ex parte communications or conflicts of interest this evening? Seeing none, if anyone wishing to speak this evening would please stand and raise their right hand to be sworn in. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
So sworn.
Okay, so we're going to do these applications since it's the same address. I guess we're going to do them together. It's application number 21-62, variance to reduce the required side and rear yard setback, and also application number 21-90, variance from the floor area ratio standards, and the location is 41522 U.S. Highway 19 North. We go to the city for presentation.
Okay. So the property, again, is located off of US 19. It's outlined in yellow here on the screen. It's just north on Cypress Street. This property, as well as all surrounding property, is located within the HB Highway Business Zoning District. There is some industrial restricted zoning to the north, which is the IR. As mentioned, this is comprised of two applications that we'll present together for the same property. The first application is application number 21-62. It's a request to reduce the minimum rear yard setback. The requirement is 25 feet. The applicants are proposing a setback of 15 feet. And the second application, number 21-90, is a request to increase the allowable floor area ratio, or the FAR. The maximum allowable FAR is 0.40, and they're requesting a 0.43 FAR. This is all for the purpose of constructing a new, just about 6,500 square foot office and warehouse building behind an existing retail commercial building on the subject property. This is a look at the proposed site plan. As you can see, there is an existing, just about 22,000 square foot building kind of in the center portion of the site. There's also some existing parking in front of that building. They are proposing the new building to be constructed on the western portion of the site. I have it outlined in the blue line. It is proposed to be 6,480 square feet in area. And they're also proposing a new parking area for this structure, which is shaded in blue, and that will have access off of Cypress Street. The first request, again, is a reduction in the rear yard. This property's primary frontage is along US 19, so the rear yard for this property is along the western property line. It's the area that's shaded in red. The HB zoning district requires a minimum rear yard of 25 feet. Again, they're proposing 15 feet for that setback. The applicant indicated that the reduced setback is necessary to provide sufficient parking for the new structure. In the application, it does note that the use of the building is proposed to be office and warehouse. However, it does not provide the breakdown of how much of the building will be used for either use. So staff at this time is unable to verify exactly what the minimum required parking would be based off the Land Development Code requirements. For your reference, I provided the parking requirements from the Land Development Code. For office, it requires a minimum of 4.5 spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. And then warehouse use only requires one space per 1,500 square feet of gross floor area. So really, depending on that breakdown, you could have a vastly different number of minimum required parking spaces. The second application, again, is a request to increase the allowable floor area ratio. The existing building on site is 21,600 square feet in size, so the current FAR is 0.33. The proposed building will add an additional 0.10 FAR, so a total of 0.43, which does exceed the 0.40 requirement. As a reminder, floor area ratio is based off of its calculation of the total land area of the project area times a ratio number, in this case 0.4, that gives you a maximum allowable square footage that you can build on the site. In this case, they would be allowed a maximum of just over 26,000 square feet. With what they have proposed, they're looking at a maximum of 28,080 square feet, so a little over 2,000 square feet more than what would be allowed. One thing to note is, yes, this property has a portion of the site that is not developed, but because the current building is below the minimum floor area ratio, they could do an expansion that would fit within that 0.40 allowance. And we have all your criteria. This is the criteria for the rear yard variance, and then for reference, we also have your FAR variance criteria, which are a series of 9. And then as a reminder, because these are 2 different applications, the board will have to take action on each of those separately. And I can answer any questions.
So if the board pleases, we will go to the applicant first, and then we can do questions of the city and the applicant. Is that okay with you guys? Okay, sir, we would be happy to hear what you have to say. Please state your name and address for the record, and you're welcome to give your presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and board members. My name is Todd Pressman, 200 2nd Avenue South, number 451. I came all the way up from St. Petersburg this evening, and when they finish that new construction between 19 and 275, it'll be half as long. We're happy to be here this evening. We appreciate your time here, and Allie's been great to work with. She walked you through a lot of this. I'm going to walk you through to orient you a little bit better and then tell you why we do meet the criteria for variances. The main point, Mr. Chairman and board members, is that this is a retrofit of an existing site. The site's existing. It has finite capacity. We have to work around an existing building and existing property. That is really our main direction here this evening. Definition of retrofit number 2 is to install modified parts or equipment in something previously manufactured or constructed. That's what we're doing. This isn't a virgin site or a vacant site. I think you're all familiar with the site. Allie walked you through that on US 19 behind the Walmart Supercenter. I'm sorry, behind the shopping center, on Cypress, next to Astroskate. This is the aerial. I'm going to go through a few aerials because I want to be sure you understand the configuration, because the configuration of it is a little bit different. So looking a little closer, as the property appraiser has it, this is the site here, the entire site of the property. There's currently parking on this portion, and this is existing as a commercial building. So the project site for tonight that we're looking at is the other half of the property. And I think it's important also, the other characteristic is the surrounding uses. Now, the site is down Small Cypress Street. It's not a commercial, really, activity. There's commercial uses. There's also highway business and industrial uses. It's mostly an industrial area because you have storage to the north, Astroskate here. This is the rear of the shopping center, so it's not a typical frontage US Highway 19 area. It's kind of a little bit more of a deader area in terms of potential uses. This is just a different shot by a bird's eye. This is the project area here. You can see the industrial type looking structure and uses in the immediate area. Oh, the arrows go the other way, excuse me, Mr. Chairman. And that's just a closer look. Now, another important characteristic here is this project site is just pure asphalt, but there is a buffer and wet green area here and a buffer and wet green area here. They're not on the property, they're on the adjacent properties, but it provides a tremendous buffering between this use and the other uses. This is from US 19, basically, this is the front of the existing building. Another shot of it, just to orient you. And this is the rear of the site. This is the project area. And again, as you can see, it is just one big piece of asphalt. There's not a single leaf of green. There's no single tree. There's no even weeds growing on the thing. No buffer, no green, no landscaping. This is abutting to the north. This is the one green, wet area I told you or showed you. And this is the same thing to the west where Astroscape is. This area here extends in back behind here. So what's proposed, which Ally pointed out to you, is, again, this would be the new building here proposed. This would be the new parking. This is the existing building. So we're working to put this site in here. You'll notice that we're providing a lot of green and buffer. I'll talk more about that in detail. Again, the project area. Oh, and that's a close-up. So this would be the proposed office and warehouse, and the parking proposed. Variance requested. Ally walked you through that well. This would be a rear setback. On this setback, 25 feet is required. We're proposing to be at 15 feet, so it's a 10-foot variance. It's not in my opinion, it's not an overly aggressive variance. And then in regard to the footprint, which would be the FAR, is a very small variance. I would take the great liberty to call it a tweak. That would be my word to use, where 0.40 is the maximum. We're seeking 0.43, so it's 0.03 in terms of the FAR. The variance of 10 feet saves an entire row of parking, which is this whole row here. And allows critical internal use of the site. Again, that comes into the retrofit of the site to make it work well and to make it work in an ability for the property to function for the use in regard to the surrounding uses. So a 15-foot setback proposed, excuse me, allows the use of storage, and part of this will be office and part will be storage on a very reasonable basis. At 25 feet, you'll see there's a boat outline here. Just a typical boat is then cut off on the 25-foot variance. So going back, and on this it's coming out, well, we lost the whole thing there. Ally, if you can help. It's still up here. I was just going to wrap up. I think it was user error. There we go. Thank you. Thank you very much. So in the proposed variance, you can see a shadow there. Maybe in your perspective you can see it. The boat fits well, but when we have to expand or comply with the required setback, that gets clipped quite a bit and really defeats the function of the proposed use. I think what's really important is in regard to the environmental, the green, the buffering, the landscaping. We will be adding 8,845 green square feet added, which clearly you can see is located all in these functions, which again is just pure asphalt. So on the retro project, we get a lot of gains and a lot of positiveness in that regard. And as I mentioned, in regard to variance criteria, there's no impact to the north. Of course, that's storage. That's a very quiet, dead use. But we have a good buffer, and same to Astroscape, a good buffer, which would alleviate any impacts that the variance criteria looks at. And then, of course, as well, we're providing a really nice buffer, 20 foot 3 inches on Cypress, which is great, 15 foot here, 10 foot 3 in the rear. So in summary, I'll say it one more time, retrofit. Strong consideration of the use proposed and the location of the surrounding uses. That was a big part of what functioned and directed this project and the resulting variances. Proposed variances, tweaks to allow the site to work, which I think, personal opinion, is a purpose of one portion of a variance. A lot of substantial improvement to the site. Site is now one big paved area. We're going to add a lot of green area and no impacts on the variances that we're aware of. Notices, of course, were sent out by the city, and I don't believe there's only one gentleman here. I don't know if there's anyone here in opposition. I would think not. We're happy to answer any questions. Oh, and our engineer, Aaron Coy, is here, so we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you.
And thank you
So,
again for your time.
since you brought it up, if the board would allow, sir, are you here to speak on this? For or against?
Mr. Jallo is here with me.
Okay, so there's no one here to speak in the public for or against. Did we get any emails or in opposition? Nothing?
Nothing.
So my question first for the city is, you notified the surrounding businesses, anybody, anything at all? No contact? I mean, nothing
No,
from Lukens?
No, the notice area is 500 feet surrounding the subject property, so that's how far we go out to notice. We did not receive any formal notifications. I did receive one email just asking for the application materials, but no follow-up from that.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Rich, please.
Related to that notification, there's that large apartment complex right down Cypress behind Astroscape that uses Cypress as well. Were they within the 500?
Well, I'll have to verify that.
Would it go to the owner or would it go to the individual?
It goes to the property owner.
So
yes.
the individual people who live in that massive apartment complex wouldn't have been
They may
notified?
have not gotten a mailed notice letter, but we do put signs on the property notifying of the public hearing. So there is a sign on the property that states that there's a public hearing on the site, and it does provide some general information stating that they are requesting setback reduction as well as a floor area ratio increase. And it has contact information to the planning department so they can get in contact with us. So that's how you kind of cover both situations, because not everyone necessarily get a notice, but you have a sign on the property.
Hard with apartment complexes
Yes.
like that. And a lot of Spanish-speaking families with small kids are in that one. Okay.
Okay, so before we go to other questions, I just wanted to clear something up. So there is no de minimis with FAR? It seemed like a very small ask. Is that, there is no,
No. FAR has very specific review criteria for the board, which are those 9 criteria that are in your staff report, and they were on the presentation. That's the only way to get an increase.
so that would always come in front of our board regardless of how
request-
small?
Right.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to go Ms. Rich, you have any more questions for the city staff? How about you, sir?
No, I have a question for John.
For him? Okay, how about you for the city?
I do, and actually, piggybacking on the question about the FAR, I believe, Ally, you had said something about that there would be an expansion would fit, an expansion of the existing facility could make this project fit within the .40 FAR. Did I misunderstand you, or could you clarify that?
Yeah, I can provide some clarification. So from staff's perspective, this site right now has an FAR of 0.33, so that's 0.07 less than what they're allowed maximum by right. So theoretically, you could do an expansion on this property. It may not be the size desired or necessary potentially for the use that they want to do, but you do have the option to expand on the site with the allowable FAR. So that was staff's perspective.
So saying that the proposed building could have, instead of the .10, it's
Right.
a
And what that kind of
0.07.
equates to from what they're proposing to what is allowed, it's just over 2,000 square feet more than what they're allowed by right. So they can have a total of 26,000 square feet on site. It could be one building, multiple stories, one story. It could be 2 buildings. Just the total square footage is 26,000 and some change that they're allowed. And right now, they're proposing just over 28,000.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Mr. Eisen?
Ally, you had also mentioned about use of the building. So it's not been declared what it will be used for? Because didn't you say that that would dictate how much parking was going to be able to be utilized or not?
Yes, so the applicant did provide that it would be used for office and warehouse use. He could probably provide maybe some more information on that. But with this application, we were not provided a breakdown. So to determine parking for uses, a lot of it's based off of square footage of how much of that building is used for that particular use. So for example, if the whole building was office, it's going to need a lot more parking required by the land development code, as opposed to if a majority or all the building was warehouse use, it'd be a lot less. So we just aren't able to verify what they're proposing meets our minimum requirement, exceeds the minimum requirement, needs more or whatnot. So we just couldn't verify those numbers.
So
We
how
just wanted
about
to
we
provide
ask the
info.
applicant directly? Can you clarify that for us, please?
Yes, sir. The definitive breakdown has not been determined. Part of that is going to be market demand. So roughly, conceptually, about 50-50%, about 50-50. But part of the issue is that we need to have a site, and not to beat a dead horse here, but we need to have a site that we will be able to accommodate if we go 75-25 or something in that manner.
So you're talking about you won't know if you can do the boat space unless you can fit a boat in there.
Well, they've done some perspective in terms of checking market demand and such, and storage of those kind of vehicles is in high demand.
Understood.
So I'm communicating 50-50. Personal opinion, I think it's going to be more towards the storage side.
I see.
That's where the demand really is.
So you have any other questions of the applicant?
I have a
The,
question.
well,
Oh, please.
That's okay,
Yes,
that's
Mr.
all right.
Burris.
Yeah, on the application, it says required side and rear yard setbacks. Which side you talking about?
We actually had a lot of discussions with staff, and it kind of varied, not varied, but it altered as to which setbacks we were asking. So to clarify that for you, we're asking for one setback variance on the Astroscape side, which is the west side. So looking at an aerial or looking at, okay, that would be good. So the setback variance is here,
Okay.
where 25 feet is required. We're requesting and asking for 15 feet to exist, so it's a 10-foot variance, which is up against these buffer areas, which is on the other property.
I can
Did I
provide just
answer-
a little bit.
My question is,
Did I answer your question, sir?
no, you didn't answer my question. My
Well-
question says required side and rear yard
Yes, sir.
variance. Which side you talking about?
So, sir, if I may go back a step, so from the date of application, in terms of conversations with the city staff, we are directed to ask for those variances. After they are filed and they reviewed them, the application request changed to a single setback variance, which is on the west side. And Ellie, I believe that's officially a rear?
Yes, yeah.
That's officially a rear setback here.
Yeah, I can
Okay.
provide a little more clarification,
Please.
maybe about the setbacks. So yes, the application originally was believed that they needed a setback variance for the side. After reviewing the application, there was some clarification that needed to be, what's the side, what's the rear, what's the front of the property. So technically, they believed the rear was the north property line, but by zoning definition, that's actually a side. So they did meet the side requirement. So that resulted in only needing a rear yard variance. Sorry, I meant to clarify that in my presentation, and I forgot to mention it.
Okay, on that note,
Yes, sir.
on page 2 of the variance, I believe is your variance, why you're requesting the variance. And it says here, front yard setback required at 30, seeking 9.9.
Well,
And
again,
then-
sir.
And then you go on and say rear yard setback required of 25, the variance to be reduced by 10 feet. Now, on this one, you're saying front and rear. At the front of the application, you have side and rear.
Yes, sir. Those changed over time from the date that we filed in working with the staff as to what variances were required. In discussion with staff, and as Ally said in their review as well, those variances that were needed differed and changed. So the only variance before you today, as a result of those reviews, is the rear setback only, as I just showed you. There was a,
Amending your application.
yes, the application had been amended as we work with staff. That's correct, ma'am. Yes.
So your analysis here on item number 1, front yard setback required at 30 and seeking to exist at 20.3.
That's
You're
not
not
needed.
asking for anything like that?
That's not needed. That was addressed and removed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Eisner.
Sir, we would love for you to come into town and build whatever it is that would help commerce. But where I have an issue is in your definition of retrofit. Retrofit is not in our criteria. And if it was, we would then be able to consider it. My definition of a retrofit is to take what we do have and to work with what we do have, not to redesign it. And as I'm reading through the criteria that we have to follow, the only one that you seem to be able to pass is number 5. So 1 through 4 is the ones that I have all issues with, or I should say possibly you guys have the issues with. So how can you have those met?
Well,
Because we really didn't discuss that,
let's look at criteria by criteria, if I may.
I'm sure.
Criteria number 1 is the need for requested variance arises out of the physical surrounding shape, topographical conditions, or other physical environmental conditions that are unique to the specific property involved, which do not apply generally to property in the same zoning district. Do you have a physical hardship that prevents you from meeting the requirements of the code? So what we presented to you is in our opinion, a very strong and bona fide criteria response, which is that to develop this site in the same capacity and at par with surrounding uses, which are storage or quiet or rare of a shopping center, in order to make it work on an existing site that has an existing building, that has a finite size, that has to meet access points and buffering and other city requirements, the variances requested are absolutely necessary.
But it has nothing to do with the property itself. You're trying to fit, in my opinion, and for a choice of good words, you're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. It just doesn't, it may not make it for what you're trying to do. This criteria explains to me that there's something that is different about the area that you need to have a variance for. And this, what you're explaining to me is just, it's not that. It's that it may not fit what your particular need is.
Well, the need is, one of the main thrusts that I presented to you, with all due respect, and I understand your concerns, I understand what you're voicing, but the use is driven by the surrounding uses. I mean, we're not going to put a twisty freeze there because it doesn't get any continued commercial traffic. We're not going to put a 7-Eleven there because it would be lost. So your uses are then defined as quieter storage type uses or industrial type uses. So the site is forced into that kind of use. Then the next point, which I won't beat a dead horse, is that how do you make a use of that nature work on a site that you do have to contend with an existing building? There is an existing building there. It eats up a tremendous amount of the site. The site has no buffering. We have to include as much buffering as we can. We're not asking for a single variance. Well, we're asking for only a small reduction of the green on the rear, but on the other sides, we're adding tremendous and having to cope with adding tremendous buffering where there is none. So the compilation of all those elements is unique, is singular, does cause difficulties. And your test, sir, is compare that to a vacant site of the same size. We could do exactly what we need to do if this were a vacant virgin site. That's where the test is. That's where variance is supportable.
So-
What we're doing on this site versus what we would do on a vacant site. That's two different worlds. So I would ask you with great confidence to consider that and how you're looking at this variance, and the other board members are as
So
well.
let me just move forward. In number 2, it
Sure.
says, "The conditions or special circumstances peculiar to this property have not been self-created or resulted from an action by the applicant." How is that not the case?
It's absolutely not the case because the site is developed to code standards and construction standards and access standards and buffer standards and parking standards that were permissible at the time that the building went in. It is developed like every other property in the entire city of Tarpon Springs per the code allowances. So those actions were permissible and allowable. Now and it was developed in the rear as well as overflow parking or some type of additional parking. So those actions are the same as any other property that this board has looked at or variance have looked at where there's been development. Nothing, no different. So in that regard, in terms of the special circumstances and peculiar to the property, which I explained in item number 1, also continue that they're not self-created or resulted from an action by the applicant because the property has been developed per standards for construction and zoning like every other property in the city of Tarpon Springs that are coming in to make changes or to make additions or to make things better.
But you're building a structure, am I correct?
That's certainly a structure is permissible. Yes, absolutely.
I understand it's permissible, but you're making a structure, so you, I'm just speaking as you, the applicant, is creating this issue.
Well, that's the same circumstance of any variance you would look at. Any applicant that comes forward is doing something to generate a change on a property. That's no different than any other variance or any other application that you review.
But if you made it smaller, it would not have that issue.
Well, that's a good point on the surface, with all due respect, sir. That would be a perspective, again, of any variance, because any variance coming through for you could always, or any project could be made smaller. Any project could pull back. Any project could reduce what they're asking. Isn't that the case?
Right.
That's exactly what we do.
That's exactly correct, sir. So, with all due respect to you, any applicant that comes forward can certainly change their application to either get away from a variance or make it a minimum variance. In our case, we have done the best that we can to ask for the minimum variance, and that's the critical factor. So, your point, sir, with all due respect, and not to get into a debate function with you at all, I think you're bringing up great points, and quite frankly, I like the debate with you, is that the actions of an applicant bringing an application forward for a change on a property does not qualify under item number 2 as does not apply to criteria number 2. It can't, or else you would have to turn down every variance that came before you.
No, there are specific reasons for us accepting a smaller setback, a smaller build. And then again, I've sat here 6 years. We've also accepted variances when there is a real issue where there's nothing else that can be done. Right here and right now, in my opinion, from what I'm seeing, and with the criteria that I'm faced with, I respect your response to number 1. I don't agree with it. And I respect your response to number 2, and I don't agree with it. And if you'd like, I can go through 3 and 4 as well, and I'm sure you're going to have a very good response to me. But you have to convince me, at least, that there is nothing else that you can do to change these numbers. And, you know, just using the word retrofit is not the answer. A retrofit is you're trying to fit something into an existing build, and you're now trying to build something else alongside it, and it's too large for the property. Under the
I would suggest...
under the rules and regulations that we have to go by.
I
just want to let you know,
yes, sir.
and this is just off, people will come before us and they want to build a shed, and the shed is too large for the property. And we just can't decide that we're going to give you a shed that's, you know, X amount of size just because that may be what you need.
I would also suggest concentrating on what's occurring here. What's occurring here is a site that is pure asphalt, and I won't beat a dead horse. We're bringing it up to a beautiful compliance that takes a lot of the property away with a 20-foot buffer in the front, by memory, 10-foot buffer in the north that doesn't exist environmentally and beautifully, and taking a site that is just a paved parking lot and making it work, improving it, and adding a good commercial use on the property. I think that's an important part of the equation as well.
We appreciate this
Sure.
beautification, believe me. So let me just, might as well throw number 3. It says literal enforcement of the requirements of the code would have the effect of denying the applicant reasonable use of the property. You have reasonable use of the property as long as you were to build within the guidelines.
The best answer I can give you, sir, is that it's driven by the surrounding uses and its location, which is a difficult location and calls for certain uses. That's why the applicants come forward with the use proposed, as I explained other examples of uses that could go there. That drives this application. What then next drives the application is the difficulty of making it work. Sure, the applicant could add a small addition to the existing building, but that doesn't meet the needs and what the market is calling for on the property.
Let me give you a different analogy.
Yes, sir.
I want to build an airport, and I want to make that a landing strip. I cannot make that a landing strip. It's too small. What you're trying to put there doesn't fall under the Tarpon Springs guidelines for land development. It's too small. And you're trying to have us break our rules in trying to explain that it doesn't fit your needs. I'm agreeing with you. It doesn't fit your needs. But you're not giving us the reason why we should be leaning on to a setback that makes us break the rules, because without that, you would have no shot at this. And the only reason you're giving me this is because it doesn't fit what your particular application at this site is. And I understand it doesn't fit. But it's not because of the property, it's because it doesn't fit.
The chairman used a very good word. He used the word diminutive. And in planner circles, diminutive means very small. So what is being requested here? What's being requested is a 0.03 difference in the FAR. What's being requested on one setback only, 10 feet. Personally, I would call that de minimis. That's compared to analogy that you well submitted of an airport. Now, clearly an airport's not going to go here. But what's proposed, in our opinion, is diminutive. And it doesn't give any special privilege to anyone, as variance item number 4 proposes, and certainly doesn't diminish property values. In fact, it would be the opposite. It would increase property values in variance criteria number 5.
Unfortunately, you don't get points for adding to the property value, even though that is one of them that you would get. Number 5, I have no issues with. Number 4, I do as well.
The only thing I would say in closing, sir, and I really do appreciate your comments. You've obviously looked at this very closely. Obviously, we disagree. I don't think I'm going to change your mind, so we have to wait for the other members, and we hope we have your support. But an analogy of placing something like an airport on this property is far away, light years away from what we're proposing. I think that actually illustrates part of the reason why a variance is supportable.
Well, that was just an analogy. I know we're not.
Yes, sir.
You know.
I'm doing the best I can at the answer.
I have to explain something to you. We've had a situation in the past where a building height was 43 feet and they wanted 53 feet. And, you know, to somebody giving a presentation, they would say, all you need is 10 feet. That's a lot. So, you know, by you saying that you only need 0.03, it's 2,000 square feet when you do the math. So it's not a small amount. You're going to have to take that from somewhere. Whether you're sacrificing some parking spot and moving it forward away from the other property, or, you know, something that you're going to have to do. But all 4 of these 5, you're not hitting well.
I think the important factor is that the setback variance abuts up to a 20 or 25-foot buffer area. That's a critical consideration, as I showed you.
Yes.
And
we realize that.
And I'm sorry, sir?
We realize that, yes.
And in regard to the parking, you can't just pick out 1 or 2 or 3 parking spaces because parking comes in a row. So our difficulty is that configuration. And I'll be happy answering the questions or points you have, sir.
Well, hang on a second. So you've been asking him about the rear yard variance. Do you have any problems with him meeting the criteria for the FAR?
I do.
Well,
Okay, let's go to Mr. Burris.
Yes, sir. You
Yes, sir.
mentioned that the existing building has parking on the rear of the building?
Well, it's an asphalt area, and it is used for parking, as I've seen.
The existing building, what is the requirement for the number of spaces?
I don't know offhand. Aaron, do you know offhand? I don't have the immediate answer for that, sir.
I'm sorry?
I don't have the immediate answer for that. Aaron, our engineer, may.
Yeah. And as we're talking about parking, if I may
Please.
piggyback off of you, Mr. Burris, doing a bit of math here, as was pointed out, office use, it's 4.5 spaces per 1,000 square feet versus the warehouse, which is 1 space per 1,500 square feet. So I think this may really benefit you and could help us as well get a better picture of what's going on if you did have something to present to us that clarified what was the square footage that would be office versus warehouse, because then you would know what your parking requirement is, which could help with the site plan.
That would be wondrous. We'd love to have it too. But at this point, it's impossible to say. One thing about these type of structures, as I've seen personally, is that they can modify over time. You move a wall, push a wall. But as I've indicated, the apparent bigger demand here is for storage, per the location and per what the applicant has felt in the market. So we do expect, as I said, probably 75-25 for storage.
And I appreciate that and I respect that. And the problem is we can't vote one way or the other on a variance based on the speculation or hopes or, thoughts, which I agree with your thoughts of probably would be more warehouse versus office, since we're working in virtual environments a lot more these days. I see people needing to store things as opposed to have office space. But we just don't have the facts in front of us, and unfortunately, and I feel for you, you don't have the ability at this point to present that information. And as Mr. Burris said, the really good question about, was it Lucan's Liquors, the store that's in front, right? So I guess we would need to know, maybe the engineer has those numbers. What is their parking requirement? How many spaces do they need? Is it being met by the parking lot in the front of the store at that 19 frontage, or are they relying on this area that you're looking to develop to meet their parking needs?
Aaron here is whispering in my ear. Can I have 20 seconds?
Absolutely.
Yes, please. Take your time.
Chris?
And perhaps, Ally, could you answer her question about Lucan's? How many spots do they need?
So what I can do is tell you what the requirement is in the land development code. I can't tell you exactly the numbers because I don't have the sizes of the retail space. But for just a general retail sales establishment, so a commercial use, you're required 1 space per 250 square feet of gross floor area. And then as far as parking goes as well, if this project were to move forward, they would have to go through a site plan approval process, and that's when parking would be 100% solidified as to what they're required to make sure that they met. So they would have to provide more definitive answers as to percentages and whatnot. So it does get verified if it moves on beyond this place. But that's, like I said, the retail sales establishment is just 1 space per 250 square feet.
Okay. Mr. Burris, does that help you out?
No.
Okay, well, he's coming back, hopefully,
Yes.
to help respond to your query.
I still wanted to, you cut me off.
Okay, Mr. Burris was asking you about parking.
Yes. So what Aaron has indicated is that they are completely parked in the front, and actually 2 spaces would be required in the rear per what the current use is in front. But one of the things Aaron made me aware of, and maybe Ally can respond, is that we have the understanding there is a office warehouse parking rate, which is a rate that looks at both office and warehouse, which is 1 space per 650 square feet. So that ties in well with the use that's proposed, and may help answer your questions, Miss.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I want to take it one point further.
Please.
Initially, you mentioned 50/50 is going to be retail of the new building and warehouse. And then as the conversation progressed, you said 75-25. Is that 75% warehouse?
Yeah, our discussions have been targeting about 75% storage, sir.
Okay, then to Mr. Eisner's points, that's in the air. We don't know.
I'm sorry?
We do not know the answer. If
To-
it's 75-25, 50-50, We don't know exactly what it is.
Well, former president once said that everybody who renovates their kitchen knows it takes twice as long and twice as much money.
Sir, I don't need any lessons, please.
I'm not giving you lessons. I'm just making a point by analogy
Okay.
that it would be wonderful to come forward. The best answer I can give you is that at this stage, 75% would be storage.
Okay, on page 2 of your analysis for the request for the variance.
Yes, sir.
You say, item 1, highlighted, the site is severely constrained and so on and so forth, in order to provide minimal access, truck turning radius. Looking at the new proposed building that you have here, you have packed a set of parking spaces right in the middle of the asphalt or the property that you have there. How do you expect to get easier access for the trucks to turn around when you put more extra spaces in there?
Well, that statement was an error on my part. At the time we filed the application, I was under the impression that the industrial or storage uses would be different, that it would require truck movements. That's not the case. Truck movements will not be a part of the application.
Thank you, sir.
Chris?
Okay. Yes, Mr. Eisner.
So I was asked by Chairman about the .43. So I was kind of mostly sticking with the setbacks. So on that particular criteria, we have 9 criteria that we need to speak about.
Yes, sir.
And on 8 of them, your request has not met the criteria. So do you want me to read these and explain why they don't meet, or do you want to try to explain how I should ignore the has not met?
We're very familiar with the 9 criteria. We evaluated them before we filed the application, and we feel very strongly we meet them all. I'd be happy to respond to all 9 if you like. That's up to you.
Actually, I would like to hear that, please. Unless, Ms. Rich, you have a question in the meantime.
Well, the only thing, I know that, you're very professional and you do a very good job going to hearings all over the county and state. But one of, the things that I always appreciated that you say is you need to know the criteria, before you go to present to the board. And I'm really struggling with your response to even the first about the property location. Because when you're talking about the physical property, it's talking about things like large tree or, slope of the land. It's not talking about the use or the desired. So I find it interesting that you're not following your own advice that you give to people. So I'll let him continue.
Well, may I respond just in short? First of all, I appreciate the compliment. Thank you very much. That's very nice. I would say with all due respect that we went through the first set of criteria with the gentleman at the end. I thought that we did address, I understand you don't agree with that, but I thought that we did go through those very closely. And I understand you have a difference of opinion. But the only thing I would say is the use generates the application, but it is the existing site that generates the variance.
That's not our criteria.
I understand we obviously we differ with that. I just wanted to clarify that.
So go ahead with your FAR variance standards, please.
Yes, sir. Item number 1 is that the literal interpretation of the FAR will deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same future land use category and will work unnecessary and undue hardship. Very clearly, I presented to you a site that we have to work within its confines and provide additional elements such as buffers, access points, and parking to make the site work. The site does not work as is driven as presented. Item number 2 is that the alleged hardship is unique and singular with regard to the property of which the variance is sought. It's not suffered in common. This is a site that we are seeking to develop after there's a large existing use, and we have to work around that, plus all the codes and requirements the city requires. Item number 3 is alleged hardship is not self-imposed by the applicant. I think I did respond to that to the gentleman at the end, although we didn't agree, which that the site is existing. We had to work in between those confines, those difficulties, and the new codes and requirements. Item 4 is the adjustment will not substantially interfere with the range of the rights of others. I think that's certainly the case. We've had no one come forward today. There's a lot of buffering between the uses. I don't think that's been contested by, with great respect, I don't think that's been contested by board members. Item number 5, the adjustment allowed will be in harmony with, serves the general intent and purpose and consistent of the FLU and comp plan. I think that's the case, certainly, in that this is a site that is located in a unusual, in a little bit of an unusual location in terms of what needs to occur on it by market demands. And what's proposed does meet the use meets the intent and purpose of the codes and the FLU, and that what we're requesting is de minimis to make those work. Number 5 is will be in harmony with the general intent and purpose consistent with the FLU and the comp plan. The use is what's proposed, and the issues before you are 2 elements that do make it work, again, in regard to the confines of the property and what's existing on the property. Number 6, the adjustment if allowed will be the minimum adjustment. I think that has been clear. We are asking for the minimum of the site on both issues, as has been designed by our civil engineer. 7, the adjustment allowed will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied the FLU or the comp plan or regulations. I think that's certainly the case. To the public, it would appear like any other commercial or industrial type building. There'd be nothing certainly that would be applied to it that would be outrageously different than and what anyone else could do on their property, particularly if their property like this is already developed. 7, I just read. 8, the adjustment allowed will not constitute an amendment to the city's comp plan. That's certainly the case, or certainly not the case. Number 9, an amendment to another land use category in the city and countywide future land plan has been considered by the applicant and the city if it has been determined that such amendment would not meet the objective of the adjustment, which is the case here.
Chris. Mr. Dabrowski.
Yes, Mr. Eisner.
Sir, I appreciate what you just shared with us. The only issue I have, which is probably the biggest issue, is you yourself admitted that I don't agree with you. And that's the whole purpose of you being here, is to get me to agree with you.
We'd love to have your support. It's apparent that we don't. I can only say to you that we appreciate your time and patience tonight. We appreciate your consideration, and we do feel very strongly we meet all the criteria.
Well, I wish you gave a better presentation to make me agree with you. I don't. I just thank you for it. I didn't agree with the first 1 through 4, and I could maybe give you a couple on this particular, 1 of 9, 2 of 9, but for the most part, I'm not agreeing with your definition of what this criteria is.
Well, we appreciate your consideration, sir.
Vice Chair, what do you got?
I do appreciate you coming out here, and I always love to see positive development that could enhance our city. Unfortunately, I do share many of the same sentiments as my fellow board members. As Ms. Rich said, we are constrained by the criteria. This is, what is said in our codes and ordinances, and set under law here. So when we're looking at that the need for these variances, the heart of it is that these are things that are beyond your control. As Ms. Rich had said, is there a serious slope? Is there a 200-year-old oak tree in the middle of a piece of property? Is it a very oddly pie-shaped lot? These are the conditions that we're looking at. We've been faced with challenging situations on this board many times where we're seeing great projects which could enhance our community, and we want, as residents, but we have to abide by this criteria. This is where I was asking about the parking, seeing if there was the opportunity to, we're not supposed to design on the fly here. We've, had those discussions, but to, reduce that by the 2,000 square feet, move it to 10 feet. We are blessed to have, amazing folks like Ally and Patricia McNeese on our team here to assist with that. And quite frankly, our hands are tied with this to where there is reasonable use that is available to you or whomever may own the property. But what is presented in front of us, unfortunately, does not meet that at this time.
Mr. Boris?
I don't have any further comment.
Ms. Rich, anything? So I guess there's no need for any sort of rebuttal since there was no other presentation. We do have two in front of us,
You want to handle them separately?
and we're going to vote on them separately.
Yes.
That's correct.
Two separate motions, please.
So I would just ask the applicant before you walk away.
Yes, sir.
If you got one instead of the other, would that make a massive difference in your planning, or is this an all or nothing?
I'm just going to ask that question not be answered.
Okay.
Only because it's not relevant to the criteria in either of the variances.
Okay. It was a curiosity-driven question. So I guess we're going to go for a motion,
I make a motion to deny.
I'll second.
and this is on the first.
Yeah, I was going to say, what's the motion
This is on the rear yard,
2162.
the rear yard variance. So you said a motion to deny, and we have a second?
Yes.
Roll call.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Point of order, there is a gentleman here who would like to speak.
Oh, please.
And we didn't call
The
for
more-
the public,
more the
so
merrier.
I
Come on up.
apologize, I didn't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
I apologize to interrupt.
Yep, then before we
Well, we do have a motion and a second on the table. The public hearing has been closed. There was a call for public comment at that time, and nobody's raised their hand. Is he with your organization, or is he? I'm the owner. So you are then part of the applicant. So the time for the presentation has come and gone. I defer to the chairman, but there is a motion and a second on the
Yeah,
table.
if the board is okay with hearing from this gentleman, I'd love to hear from this gentleman. Is that okay with you? And
The consensus
so
of the
then we will
board.
table the motion, and please, sir.
Thank you. Good evening. If I look on the side, you see nice and clean side, no homeless, no garbage, nothing. I keep it maintained. I do business in Pinellas County. I own Lucan Liquors. We tried to put 6,500 square feet. I have 10,000 square feet up front. I didn't rent it because I don't need people to park. And you asked my guy, you said, storage or office? It's gonna be 100% storage. So I keep it nice and clean. You're gonna see beautiful building. I don't know why we denied. Simple question to all of you.
Sir,
Yes.
can I answer?
Please.
We started at 50/50, we went 75/25, now we're 100% storage.
Yes.
Which one is it?
Storage, 100% storage. I'm the owner.
Okay, we'll take that I'll take that under consideration. Thank you,
Thank you. And I keep it nice and clean for you guys.
thank you. For us.
Thank you.
Okay. So any more discussion on this motion before we vote a vote? Just for the record, I have no problem with this application, and I had, I'm pretty flexible, do a lot of yoga, a lot of stretching, and I like the spin that the gentleman gave on each criteria. It's quite well done. However, we're going for roll call.
Wait, so we have now untabled the motion and the second?
That's correct. Now we're going for roll call on the motion. This is for the rear yard variance.
Ms. Rich?
Yes.
Mr. Eisner?
Yes.
Mr. Burris?
Yes,
Ms. Turner?
Yes.
Mr. Abowski?
No. Now we're going to go for the FAR. Floor area ratio. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to deny again.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Rich?
Yes.
Mr. Eisner?
Yes.
Mr. Burris?
Yes.
Ms. Turner?
Yes.
Mr. Rabowski?
No. Sorry, friends.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, board members.
Thank you for your
Good luck
time,
to you.
sir.
Okay, so we have handled that. The number 5, application 2186, variance to reduce the wetland setback has been deferred until August 25th. Staff comments.
I have none.
Okay. Board comments.
Did a good job. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anything else? Are you sure? Okay.
Are you fishing for comments? Because I'll be happy to share.
Oh, so I guess we're adjourned at 8 p.m.
Meeting, minutes? Did
The
we?
minutes?
There was no minutes on here.
Minutes. Focus, Jackie.
And I guess we do have a meeting in August.
Yes,
25th.
So,
What
'cause
gave
it
that
says it
away?
right here.
as of right now.
That, for this deferred app.
Okay.
Thank you all for your time. Look at that. Exactly 8.
Yep,
Bam.
perfect. We did it in 1 hour, you guys. It's amazing.
My boot is stuck. I got my